Hello everybody. You may or may not have noticed that I haven't made a whole lot of videos in the last month or so. Well, simply put, my computer died. Thankfully, somebody I know was gracious enough to donate the parts I needed to get it repaired and up and going again. Now, I did make a promise to Jeranism that my first video would be a reply to an open letter that he has hidden on his webpage if you don't know where to look for it. Realistically though, in order to make a proper reply, I'm going to have to sit through a 4-hour hangout for Jeranism and a 4-hour hangout for Red's Rhetoric, just so I can get the timestamps correct and all of my information in a row. So for clarity's sake, that video will be put up when I'm done with it. However, it will not be my first video because I don't want to spend a week watching 2 videos just to make a single reply. I will do this in my own time, but it will be soon. But now to the meat of this video. Since about September of last year, I've been kind of helping out and pointing out another conspiracy for Nibiru. Normally this is something that is handled by Astronomy Live and Dazzathecameraman. But there's this one particular conspiratard that has done something that I have always been adamantly against. When somebody points out the flaws in his methodology or his results, he censors them away, and simply calls them troll. Well, Mr. Scott Sion, of Nibiru Planet X 2016 channel, this video is just for you. Over the last month, Scott has made several videos dealing with something he calls a laser lens. He places this lens in front of his camera and then records the sun, noting that there's a second object below or close to the sun. Now, Scott understands the whole principle of lens reflection and lens flares being 2 separate things. Lens flares tend to be the reflections of a light source inside the actual lens housing between all the separate panes of glass. Lens flares tend to move in the opposite direction of the light source in the frame of the picture. Now, a lens reflection is caused by a separate piece of glass external to the lens system. And what's happening in this case is the light hits the lens, then it bounces back to the external piece of glass, and then the lens picks that up again. The result of all this is that the light source that's being reflected and picked up again will always stay in the same orientation and distance from the original light source, unless the orientation of the piece of glass that is being reflected on changes compared to the lens. Now, the reason why I can say Scott Sion fully understands this concept is because of his latest series of videos with his laser lens. In his multi-part video series recording the sun with his laser lens, he always shows the same thing. A secondary light source that's always the same distance and the same orientation for that particular video. For example, in the first video of his series, he shows the sun and the secondary object below it and a little bit to the right. He later in the video pans down to show the hood of his car and shows the reflection of the secondary object along with the sun. He then declares that because it's showing up in a reflection off the hood of his car, it must be a true object in the sky. Unfortunately for Scott, even though he might understand how lens reflections and lens flares work, he obviously doesn't know how mirrors work. What myself and many others on his channel noted was that the reflected light sources were in the same exact orientation as they were in the sky, with the smaller light source being below and just a little to the right of the main light source of the sun, just as it was in the sky. Had this been a true reflection of an object in the sky below and to the right of the sun, in the reflection on the hood, the smaller object would have been above and to the right. Here's a small video demonstration proving that concept.
Alright, Scott, as you can see, I have a penny and a dime put on the door in the same orientation that you have in your video as the sun and its little second companion. I also have a little handheld mirror. Pretty simple. But see, you make the mistake of showing the reflection in your car hood that you are so proud of, stating that because it's reflected, it has to prove that it's an actual object. But as I pointed out in comments, the reflection isn't mirrored like it's supposed to be. For example, let's put that on the floor, and then find it again. Being reflected vertically, you now see that the penny is below the dime in the reflection. This proves that the aberration in your video is actually just an artifact in the lens because of that second lens you're adding on. You don't have it lined up right, so it is adequately adding a stationary reflection.
Now, I pointed this little flaw out to Scott in a comment thread which his only reply was deleting the thread. So I did the sensible thing and started to leave the same reply on other people's comments that questioned it as well, and then pointed them to a picture I took of the penny and dime demonstration. In some cases, he would delete the entire comment thread that I didn't start, and in others, he would just delete my replies. Now that that takes care of the whole lens reflection issue, we can move on to the point of showing to where he's being fraudulent in his claims. See, Scott understands how to get rid of a lens reflection and a lens flare by doing what's called the finger test. What this entails is something very, very simple. Either place your finger or another solid object in front of the secondary light source and to see if it shows up in front of the object still in frame. As a secondary test, you can place your finger or a solid object in front of the actual light source and see if the secondary object disappears. And here's where his fraud is very, very apparent. In one of my comments where I talked about the finger test, he said to another user after he deleted my comment that he's done the finger test. Well, I will leave a link to all of his videos about the laser test in the description. What you will quickly find out is that he's never done the finger test in any of these videos. He outright lied to one of his subscribers. Well, the joke's on Scott because even though he's not willing to do the finger test to test his own claims, good old Mother Nature decided to play a practical joke on him and actually do the finger test for him. You see, Scott was in such a hurry to put these videos up as evidence of Nibiru in the sky that he didn't notice that with the partial cloud cover, that sometimes they would cover the secondary object and sometimes they would cover the sun, and every now and then they'd cover both at the same time. One of the things that myself and his subscribers noticed was that when the cloud cover would only cover the secondary object, it would not change in the slightest. But when the clouds blocked only the sun, the secondary object would vanish entirely. Or in some cases, when the cloud cover would cover both, the thicker cloud cover was under the secondary object, but it would still shine brightly as long as the cloud cover was very thin over the actual sun. There's even a few instances where the cloud cover over the secondary object is almost completely opaque, but the secondary object is still quite visible. And in other cases, the secondary object is completely gone when there's virtually no cloud cover, but there's cloud cover over the actual sun, so the secondary object has disappeared. Now, if you go to his videos, you'll quickly notice that just for this series of videos, Scott has actually had to take down all comments and disable them because even his subscribers were starting to notice that he's a fraud over this whole series. So even though he's been called out by his current subscribers that this demonstration is absolutely worthless because he was refusing to do the finger test, he still has the videos up and comments disabled so newcomers will not see that even his own subscribers are starting to question his credibility.